genetically modified foods are everywhere. Even when it says organic, it's not necessarily organic. I mean, there's so much deception going on. But then again, Jesus told us that. And if we enter each day thinking that everything is just, we can believe what's coming at us, we can trust what is being said, we are most naive.
And if you happen to be one of those people who stands in the aisles at the supermarket looking for the names of ingredients that you can't pronounce and therefore you don't want to ingest into your body, well, then you've most likely come across the names of several ingredients that, perhaps unbeknownst to you, are actually made using nanotechnology. Specifically, they're made through a process which converts things like silver, copper, gold, aluminum, silicon, carbon, as well as different metal oxides into tiny, tiny, tiny atom-sized particles that are quite literally 1/1,000,000th of a meter in size. If you want a visual for how small that is, up on screen is a graph from the National Center for Electron Microscopy, and it shows you how a strand of DNA, which is about 2 nanometers in diameter, is about 1,000 times smaller than a bacteria organism and about 1,000,000 times smaller than a raindrop. So that is to say, these nanoparticles in our food are very, very small. Now, some of the more common nano-sized ingredients that you might be able to find in your cupboard right now, if you were to look, include things like titanium dioxide, which is used to increase the whiteness of things like milk, yogurt, and sugar. You might find silicon oxide, which is added as an anti-caking agent. You might find iron and zinc dioxides, which are added to increase supposed nutritional value. You might find different silver derivatives, which are added for sterilizing properties. And you might find a host of other ingredients like calcium carbonate, tricalcium phosphates, and so on and so forth. The list is rather long. However, before we move on, in order to really set the stage for you properly here, let me back up for a quick moment and actually explain to you what this is all about. Starting back in the 1990s, so about 30 full years ago, nanotechnology became widely used in the production of food products. That's because scientists discovered that by adding these tiny little components, they were able to make our food more colorful, they were able to make it brighter, creamier, crunchier, and they were even able to keep it fresher for longer. According to more and more consumer protection groups, as well as different health experts, well, there appears to be a catch, which is that while these nanoparticles can provide a myriad of benefits, they might come at a price. And that price is our health. Because you see, these particles are so small, so tiny, that studies like this one here that you can see up on screen for yourself show that they can actually breach the blood-brain barrier. Furthermore, besides breaching the blood-brain barrier, other studies have shown that these particles are also able to circulate throughout the body, to get into and get absorbed by the bloodstream and different organs. They have the potential to penetrate our cell walls, and then they might also, at least potentially, create inflammation and disease. Here's, for instance, what Dr. George Pirgiotakis, who is a researcher with the Harvard School for Public Health, here's what he said regarding this matter, quote, "They may pass through the lining of the gut and enter the bloodstream, which may trigger an inflammatory or immune response. They may also build up in various parts of the body, including the lungs, the heart, and reproductive organs." Likewise, Dr. Rolf Halden, who is the director of the Center for Environmental Health Engineering over at Arizona State University, he was quoted in a recent article as saying this, quote, "We really don't know what the impact of these particles is. Human exposure is increasing, and we lack the tools to even measure what is arriving in our bodies, where it is deposited, and what it does there." Then he actually went on to compare this unknown impact of nanoparticles to asbestos. Quote, "Asbestos itself is relatively benign. It's an inorganic material. What makes it toxic and makes it kill 90,000 people a year is that it has particles that lodges in human tissue." Furthermore, one of the main reasons that you likely don't know about these nanoparticle ingredients is because of the fact that the FDA's guidance explicitly states that companies do not have to place nanotechnology ingredients on the labels of their food products. Here's specifically what it says in this guidance document, again, that came from the FDA in 2007, quote, "Because the current science does not support a finding that classes of products with nanoscale materials necessarily present greater safety concerns than classes of products without nanoscale materials, the FDA Nanotechnology Task Force does not believe there is a basis for saying that, as a general matter, a product containing nanoscale materials must be labeled as such. Therefore, the task force is not recommending that the agency require such labeling at this time. Instead, the task force recommends that the agency take the following action: address on a case-by-case basis whether labeling must or may contain information on the use of nanoscale materials." That is, quite frankly, rather cool. The recommendation is that since the science doesn't suggest that these food products with nanotech present a greater safety risk, well, then they don't need a label, even though that same science has no long-term studies on the impacts of such nanotech. And so we as the consumers are quite frankly just left in the dark. There is a chart showing that the number of products using nanotechnology submitted to the FDA for approval has increased dramatically over the past 10 and 20 years. Now, of course, not all of that is food. It also includes things like cosmetics, medicines, as well as vaccines, which we'll get to in a moment. However, in regards to food, while the exact number is not exactly known, experts in this field estimate that somewhere between 1,900 and 2,500 food products are currently on the market using this nanotechnology. And this has created kind of an interesting juxtaposition between America and some other countries in the world. Because despite the fact that there is scant research on the long-term effects of ingesting nanoparticles, well, as we mentioned earlier, the FDA does not require any food items produced with nanoparticles to be labeled as such. And instead, the guidelines that they do have recommend oversight on a case-by-case basis. However, other nations are not as open-minded, you can say, as the FDA. In fact, many countries have taken steps to either limit or outright ban either all or some nanotechnology in their nation's food. For instance, in the summer of 2022, all of the EU will actually join France and no longer allow titanium dioxide. Their reasoning stems from a, quote, potential concern over accumulation of titanium dioxide particles in the body and possible genotoxicity. Genotoxicity is the ability for a substance to damage DNA, which may lead to cancer. Meaning that if you want that sweet titanium dioxide, well, you'll have to come all the way here to the US to get it. And for your reference, titanium dioxide gives food a nice white color, and so you can find it in things like milk, coffee creamer, toothpaste, cakes, pastries, and so on. Now, again, I'm not saying that it's actually harmful, or I'm not saying that it's actually safe, but at this moment, it's not 100% known either way. However, what is known is that the FDA currently allows these nanoparticles to be included in our food items without requiring the actual manufacturing companies themselves to place them on the ingredients label. So take that for what you will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Perfect.
Wow. Wow.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Wow. But I will tell you, it shows you how Americans are comfortable not knowing.
Right. Do you see how the other countries are reacting on that? They don't
Well,
play that.
well, let me share this
They
with
don't
you.
have that favoritism in the.
No, they
that's
don't.
right.
They don't play that game. I never will forget when I went to Israel and I discovered that they do not permit Heinz ketchup. And they don't permit Heinz ketchup because they said that Heinz ketchup was really not tomato based. It was more high fructose corn syrup than it was tomatoes. And so therefore they said it's false advertising and they won't permit it in their country. So because we don't dig and ask questions, we end up consuming products that are harmful. One thing I did notice that this gentleman who was explaining about nanoparticles, that he wasn't saying that it will cause a damage to the body, but he's basically saying he doesn't know that it won't because there's just not enough studies done on it. But he's making the case that because these companies don't want it to be included in the ingredients is a flag. It's a flag for us to recognize that something is up. And if you want to look at this from a biblical perspective, remember that Jesus said that the key issue at the end of time was deception. And we always think of deception in the context of the papacy or spiritualism. But what we have learned between this morning and this evening is there is a lot of corporate deception among corporations regarding food, regarding medicines, regarding vitamins, regarding condiments. So what are we really learning? We're learning that deception is not just in the religious sphere, but it's also it's in every area of our lives. Can you give us, in a simplified way, Professor, what he's really getting at when he really speaks about the whole matter of the nanoparticles? And of course, there's not enough known about it yet, but there is enough known because other countries are not permitting it. So can you share with us what your research has found regarding harmful effects to the body and just kind of round it out for us?
I don't have the scientific study data, but generally speaking, what he's talking about is that this technology is moving so fast and they don't want people to really know where it's going. It's been around for a very long time. That's the other flag that should awaken everyone. Since the 90s, that's when we knew it was available, but it was probably even before then that it was not even disclosed at some point. So this technology is a weaponized technology and is designed to cause disruption in the body. That's the way it works. We can see the effects of that, but they have been hiding the studies here in the U.S. to even give you more detailed information about that. They have been suppressing the information. They have been falsifying the information. They have been limiting access to the information. All these things are designed to keep people from being aware of what's going on. Here's one thing that's related to this. So in looking at some of the scientists who were involved and some of the people behind the scenes, I noticed that there was like awards for different Catholics in industry, and I was like wondering if there's a connection. So then when I went to look at different companies, I'm going to give you an individual's name. This person is deceased, but she was a CEO of, let's see here, she was the chairman and chief executive of Sara Lee and was the first female CEO at Pepsi Corporation. Her name was Brenda Barnes. She's now deceased, but she was one of the, this article was an exaltation of different Catholics who were involved in the food industry. And her name was one of those persons on the list that they were giving a lot of praise and accolades to. So she was one of those who was helping this whole process to go through based on connections to Rome, basically, because they all were different people in the food industry, had different things they were noted for. But she was the only one that, right off the bat, you can see she was a major, like, out front player that was connected to these headline garnering commercial producing companies that everyone knows their brand, everyone knows their name, basically. So that's that's kind of what's going on behind this. This is just didn't jump into the ballpark by chance. These people have been backing it, that know Satan's game plan, and they are working along those lines.
Ultimate objective from what your research has disclosed?
Well, so far there is a lot of moving parts. This is just part of the technology. As we were learning from Klaus Schwab, the technology is being used to control, to survey. This technology also has the ability to have surveillance in it too. That's another point. It is multi-pronged. It's not just one area. So it is all designed to cause disturbance. But I was listening to this other conversation here. It's another group of people talking about bioengineering. The cheaper companies or the brands that hold the cheaper products, this would be Dollar General as one of the examples. So the gentleman went to the store and he found something on the shelf. He saw the bioengineered on it and he had questions and there's a number to call. So we called the number. And so the person on the phone is talking to this person. So if you listen carefully, they're going to exchange information. She evidently was looking herself into what was going on because she receives the calls as a call center. But that doesn't mean that she's not affected. So she's going to give her dialogue here. Give me just a moment.
YouTube. Yeah. I've been quite taken aback by that myself, actually, and then I was very surprised to see all of the products that actually contain a bioengineered food product, and then it got to where I realized that some of the information I was getting, it all boiled down to that it wasn't healthy. But yeah, it is a mystery. I've actually went out of my way to start shopping differently, because I just, whatever it is that they're doing, it can't be good. So I'm like, how much more are they adding to our foods if it's not now only no GMO, but now it contains a bioengineered food product? Like, what are y'all doing to our food? All your breads, you get your breads, all your breads contain it?
Not all, but yeah. Well, Here's the thing
Yeah.
here's one thing I did find out when I did the research is that they approved all this in like 2015, and then the corporations came back and said, oh, we don't want that on our labels. And so then the politicians said, oh, okay, you don't have to put them on until 2021.
And see, this is something I've contended in personal conversations with members and constituents. And they would say, well, what about bread? I said, have you ever read bread? Have you ever read? I mean, go back to when your mother made bread, okay? Just go back.
Yeah.
What do you have? You have flour, yeast, oil. What else? Okay, a little salt. What else? You let it rise. Okay, what is all those ingredients doing? There are softeners and stabilizers, and I mean, you got all this stuff in there, and and what it is that people never stop to read the ingredients. I think that if we would read ingredients, if we would take the time to ask ourselves what things are in the bread. Let's just take bread. Let me give you an example. You can Google this. Do you know that many bread companies are not kosher? So if you want to know if bread that you're eating should be eaten, then look for the kosher sign, because many breads actually use hog enzymes as a bread softener. Okay? I mean, I stumble on this when I lived in Tennessee, and they actually have changed the name of it. So they won't say hog enzymes. They actually have created a name for it. Mono and diglycerides are hog ingredients, and it's in a lot of different foods. Diglycerides. Mono and diglycerides are hog-based ingredients, and those ingredients are in a lot of different foods. They're hidden in plain sight, but because they use alternative names, or they create names for these emulsifiers, that's really just a bread softener. It cannot get a kosher label, and there are a couple of different kosher labels. And so what you do is you look for bread that has a kosher label. Start there. The kosher symbol, I should say, the kosher symbol.
The lady was saying she personally had some loaves of bread she bought, and they were sitting out for months, and they never changed at all. And then she talked about the McDonald's food. It's the same thing. These chemicals are not designed for the human body, basically. They're designed for other purposes. When you put them in the human body, there's going to be problems. And that's why if you look at the chronic health situation in this country, it is dramatically different than it was 50 years ago. Top 3 killers are things that could be eliminated just by changing
your diet. Yeah. And it used to be, get this now, it used to be that Krispy Kreme donuts were made with lard. I didn't know that because I didn't read the ingredients. So don't go as deep as nanoparticles. You don't have to. Let me just give you some basic foods that are unclean. When I say unclean, I mean they are flat out unclean, okay, by God's standards. Okay, let's go to Chinese food. Did you know that most Chinese food, the sauce is an oyster-based sauce? Did you know that? And I'll tell you how I found out. I just started asking questions, okay? That brown sauce that you love so much is literally made with oysters. Now, if somebody offered you oysters, you would say, oh, no, I can't eat that. That's unclean. But they make it into the sauce, or they make the sauce with it, and it's consumed, and you never think about it because you don't know. Okay, that's just one example. All right, well, Professor Dennis, how would you conclude this revelation that so much of our food is actually toxic and unhealthy and destructive to what God has given us, our bodies?
Well, many of God's people do not take the health message seriously.
Okay.
So this should be an eye-opener to everyone who has their addiction, because we've all dealt with some type of addiction. And
Yes.
we do find from history, from the Bible, the Israelites fought with their problem with being addicted to the foods from Egypt. They didn't just want to join the heavenly health message with the manna. They didn't like the manna after a certain period of time, which was angels' food. So our thinking can affect us in many different ways. So my advice to everyone, including myself, as I always follow this advice, is to make sure that you're in the Bible, you're in the spirit of prophecy, you're praying daily, you are constantly seeking how you can change everything that can be changed, to be able to submit, to give yourself to God, to grow. Do not let yourself not grow. Every day is an opportunity to learn how to be closer to Christ. Surrender now while it is still available for you to surrender.
It is essential that you know what is going on in this country and in the world, politically, socially, economically, and within the religious communities of Christendom. That's why our team at Courage in Conflict Ministries takes time to deliver well-researched information that validates prophetic developments. If this message was a blessing to you, please share this video with a friend and subscribe to our channel. Stay faithful to the Lord, and remember, the journey continues. Bye for now.